My name is I'm with the Manzanar Committee. On behalf of our committee, we'd like to welcome all of you all to the 2012 Manzanar At Dusk program. I apologize for our late start. Our afternoon event went a little long, so kind of scrambling to get set up, but we're good now. How many of you, we saw a lot of hands this afternoon for first-timers at the pilgrimage. For those of you here who joined us tonight, how many of you are here for the first time for this program? Fantastic. Give yourselves a hand. What you're about to experience tonight is very different from the daytime program. The idea here is to be interactive, to share, to kind of apply what you might have seen and learned and heard today to what's going on now in all of our communities. And what you see behind me are a dedicated group of young people from 3 student organizations. One, the Pomona Nikkei Student Union, the UCLA Nikkei Student Union, and the UCSD Nikkei Student Union. To give you a little bit of history of this program, the initial was called Manzanar At Dusk, and it started around a campfire at a campground a little bit west of Independence, which is north of here a little bit. And what it was mostly college-age students, former incarcerated, sharing stories. Mostly incarcerated talking and the students listening. But also the idea was to learn from them and apply what they learned, and talk about what they learned, and apply it to their lives today. For several years, it went on and on. We had students mostly from City College San Francisco being a co-sponsor of the event. The event actually outgrew the campground and moved to the VFW Hall in Independence. But even then, that eventually became too small for this event. Back in 2008, it moved to by that time it was known as Manzanar At Dusk, which is what we call it today. By that time it moved into the Turner Center in the Manzanar National Historic Site. I'm sure most of you have been there. So imagine that place, imagine a sardine can. We basically filled that place to the brim and decided we can't hold it there anymore because we're going to damage an exhibit somewhere. So now, and we want to extend our thanks to Illinois Unified School District, Illinois High School. They're our co-sponsors. They don't charge us a cent to use their facilities. It's not to pay for it. So we're very grateful to the school district and the high school. Going back to these young people you see behind me and the young people you see along in the bleachers, they are now the ones well, basically we're returning the program back to its roots in 1997. They're the ones taking charge of this tonight, and you're going to see them in a couple minutes doing their thing, because as most of you are probably aware, those who are incarcerated behind the barbed wire, there's not many of them left. And those who are, it's not easy getting up in front of an audience and speaking. That's even more problem now than it might have been in the past. So what these young people have done is taken the challenge upon themselves to keep those stories alive. And so what they're going to do, they've worked with they've done some research, done some homework, and they're going to present to you in a creative way stories of folks who are locked up behind the barbed wire. And I'll let them take it from here.
I was in 4th grade when I was working. I first heard about the Pearl Harbor bombing over someone's car radio. Since I was still too young at that time, I did not know the significance of the attack or even where Pearl Harbor was. We had destroyed all items that had Japanese content. We were allowed to finish our school year before relocating, but my older sister could not attend her graduation ceremony because of curfew. Everyone of Japanese descent had to be home by 8 p.m.
It was wrong, and I couldn't accept it even though I wasn't Japanese American. These people hadn't done anything except go to Japanese language school. They were American just like I am. When they left for camp, I decided to go. I told my father and was happy about it. He thought I was going to be gone for only a weekend. I was very happy being with the people I admired and respected. At first, a lot of people thought I was part Japanese American. Eventually, they found out, but they accepted me.
Acceptance. My classmates made fun of me and wanted me out of their classroom as they thought I was a threat that would harm them. The principal of the school peeked into our classroom and jokingly said, "I would be careful, class, as you have one among you." I have never forgotten these words, and it has really struck a bad note with me. At the relocation center, the treatment we received was very bad. They looked upon us as if we had committed a crime and that we were responsible for the war. I was born in the United States. How could I have started the war?
It was my first pregnancy. It would have been easier if it wasn't for the meals. With morning sickness and nauseous periods, waiting in line for our meals during that time was very, very difficult, especially under the conditions that existed there. The dust storms, the heat, the cold. When my child was born in the camp hospital, she was born with an allergy to the powdered milk that they gave to babies during that time. She was only able to drink the special milk from a can. We were earning minimum salaries, which were $12 a month. We could not afford to buy canned milk. So my daughter suffered tremendously. She was in and out of the camp hospital with stomach disorders because of our inability to get this milk. She was so sick. I was very angry and felt so responsible for my child. And I think the lack of this important nutrition at this time of her life has affected her life as a whole. She didn't have the basic ingredients to be a healthy person, and there was nothing at all that I could do about it.
I was in camp at Minidoka. My husband was being held by the FBI in Montana, and corresponding was difficult. Well, we did write letters, but the censorship was so bad, when you got a piece of paper, there were a lot of holes in it. They were just basically letters with holes. And it was no use, but we did try to correspond. You weren't supposed to read any message. A lot of things we didn't know.
I guess Manzanar is mostly hearsay. I know everybody says it was really dusty there. But I do remember two things in Manzanar. One was waking up in the morning and being covered with sand, and then looking at my mattress and seeing the outline of my body on the mattress. The adults said the buildings were built too hastily. They built them out of green lumber, so all the boards shrank, which made sense. So you would have spaces between all the boards. And of course, the walls and the roof were covered with tar paper, but the floor wasn't. So all the sand would come up through the bottom of the floor whenever the wind blew, and everything would be all covered with dust. One of the adults said that they remember standing in the mess hall line and the bread was covered with sand. So the next person might turn it over, and the next person came and saw that it was sandy again. So they turned it over. And pretty soon, there was no sides to turn over. The whole loaf of bread was covered in sand. And so I remember the waking up and that.
When we got to Poster, there was not much time to impress, I think, because it was so hot. Man, it was so hot. And the train ride was very tiresome. No air conditioning, and the food was not very appetizing. We were tired. We got off the train at the station, and we were taken by bus through the desert country. And here we were, with row upon row of black barracks, no vegetation. And because the ground had to be leveled to build the barracks, what little vegetation was there before had been cleared, leaving pure dust and sand. And so, when the buses would go by, there would be clouds of dust. Other beat-down Niseis greet us at this reception center. We had to register again. All the workers were Japanese already, and so we didn't feel too foreign, as a matter of fact.
When we first started, they didn't have a gym, but later on, the Granada schools made their high school gym available to us. So in order to utilize that offer, the team and the spectators would have to walk down over a mile to Granada, and then they would play the game, and then the team and the spectators would have to walk all the way back to Amache. People didn't think about it at that time because it was the only way they could watch a basketball game. I remember there was only one community nearby. They were down the road at Los Alamos, and they had enough Japanese to form a team. So it was a Japanese-American team from Amache and a Japanese-American team from Los Alamos that played basketball and competed against each other. Even though we could play sports, we were still alienated from everyone else.
Not everyone believed in accepting camp for what it was and making the best of the situation. Some of us, we were ready to part our way out. It was my involvement in some protesting and organizing of other Niseis that were educated in Japan that got me into trouble on December 5th, when Fred Tayama got beaten up and hospitalized. I immediately got accused and sent to jail outside of Manzanar. That began what's widely known as the Manzanar riot. Hundreds of men were involved, and the guards eventually released tear gas. That's when things got out of control. The guards began to shoot into the crowd, and Kazushi Kanagawa, who was 17 at the time, was killed instantly. There are many stories about the Manzanar riot, but what is important to know is that the riot, as well as forming protesters, all branched out because we knew our civil rights and liberties were stripped from us. We knew this when we sent to camp, and when Tayama got attacked and had no right to an attorney or trial. Well, that became the cherry on top. We were stripped of all of our rights.
I needed to be the one to document camp life, so this injustice could never happen again. I was an essay from Kagawa, Japan, and opened a photography studio in Little Tokyo. As you all may know, cameras weren't allowed in Manzanar. So instead, I smuggled a lens in and made my own camera using whatever I could find at the camp. I got caught during Manzanar shooting photos, but the camp administrator actually allowed me to keep taking pictures since he found them amazing. I was assigned a non-Japanese assistant to push the shutter because I was not allowed to.
Even today, despite everything I know about the horrors of the internment, the name Manzanar retains to me the special poetry of its Spanish derivation, apple orchard. It occupies a charmed space in my mental album. I have come to understand that the strange magnetism exerted on me by a scene of human misery was the pull of affection. As a Caucasian, I was the odd one out in my anomalous position in the camp. I felt accepted in a way unique in my life. I returned the affection steadfastly. The name Manzanar, however, was a cruel paradox for the internees.
We were not treated by the government with compassion or dignity. I was 17 when I was taken to Manzanar, and they did not even inform us of the kind of environment we were going to live in. The essays were the ones who were most affected, having been uprooted from the security they had built for themselves and their children. Still, despite the extreme living circumstances, we were able to turn a prison-like environment into a huge, harmonious community that was able to enjoy daily life. By crying together, laughing together, each of us was able to support each other, forming deep relationships and becoming unified as a community.
The community we created in Manzanar was what got us through. Upon relocation, I fought to be able to bring a Japanese orphan and our orphanage to Manzanar. 2 soldiers with bayonets accompanied the orphans on the bus ride, and I still imagine how terrible they must have felt carrying guns around children. Our orphanage in Manzanar was named Children's Village and was split into 3 buildings. My husband and I managed through these years with faith that we were helping these young children. Years later, in 1992, we had a 50-year reunion of all the children from the orphanage, and I was so proud to see what wonderful adults they had grown up to be.
At first, I hated my Japanese ethnicity. I grew up in a Caucasian community, and I barely spoke Japanese. We drove to the Tulare Assembly Center, a county fairground that had been converted to a prison, with high barbed wire fences and guards. I was a prisoner, without the protection of our Constitution. But in camp, I volunteered to join the 77th Combat Infantry Division in Hawaii. Once the war ended, the government, with an insensitive and stony heart, said, "Okay, the war is over. Now go home." Home? What home? At the age of 25, after incarceration and combat, I was ready to face life. I harbor no bitterness toward the injustice I have experienced and have forgiven my country completely.
After
girl that I had known in Manzanar. We did not talk much about camp, and soon she became less friendly. Perhaps her friends objected to her making friends with anyone associated with Manzanar. In the 1960s, I went back to Manzanar, and it was actually sad to see that there was nothing there. Although it is sad that there was a Manzanar, it was mostly a good experience for me. I think by having gone to Manzanar, I learned to accept changes in my life, and that changes were even something to look forward to.
So, all these stories were taken from quotes of people who have experienced incarceration back in the 1940s. Because many Nisei are no longer with us to share their stories, this is just one way for us to keep these experiences alive. With many incarcerees passing away as the years go by, it becomes more and more important to remember what happened 70 years ago. What we sometimes forget is that with the 100,000 Japanese Americans interned, there was also 100,000 different stories. Thousands of different stories, each with their own beginning and their own ending. And that's the same for all of you. Each and every one of you had your own reason for coming out today, for the pilgrimage ceremony and for the Manzanar At Dusk program. Each of you has come today with your own story to tell, and that's what makes this program so special. So with that in mind, we're going to split off into discussion groups.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to give these students a hand for taking themselves today.